morning.
How's everybody doing today?
Oh, okay.
Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Albany Pine Bush Commission quarterly board meeting. My name's Keith Gertz. I'm the regional director for DEC's Region 4. And I also have the privilege of serving as the board chair. First thing I'd like to do is go around the table and introduce the other board members. To my left is Chris Hauver, Executive Director of the Albany Pine Bush Commission. And then to his left is Tony Wilkinson from the Nature Conservancy. And then Elaine Ball from Parks. And then we have Harvey Alexander, assistant member. And Steve Rice. And then we have Nancy Pearson. And Mike Lyons from Connie. And John Brust over here.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, first order of business is to consider the minutes from the last meeting. That's for motion.
Any questions on the minutes? Comments? No?
Motion?
Nancy? Second.
Second.
Tony? All in favor?
All in favor?
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anybody from the public that would like to make a few comments? Okay. All right, I guess we'll move on to reports. I don't have much to report. I just wanted to mention that DEC staff is working closely with Pine Bush Commission staff on the city's mitigation proposal, and that's moving forward in a positive direction. And now, if anybody from the board would like to report anything? Anybody? Okay, moving right along.
Okay. Just a few things for some updates. I would like to first introduce Vicki Studley. Vicki is our new visitor services specialist at the front desk. Vicki is the new smiling face that you see and the person that greets you at the front desk. And Vicki started with us less than 2 months ago. Am I right? Right. See what my memory is. So welcome, Vicki. And also we have with us, this is the time of year where we have our interns and our seasonal staff. We have now 12 interns and seasonal staff that are working with us. With us today we have Grace Barber and Christy McFarland. Christy she's an intern with us from Siena, and Grace is she's a educational seasonal staff member, and Grace did her graduate work here with us, and she's worked with us in the past, so we welcome Grace back. We're happy you're with us. A few other things, we have new maps, and I want to recognize the staff for working on this and putting this together. Wendy Craney, Jesse Hoffman, Joel Hecht, Aaron Keinel, and all the other staff that were involved. This is one area, so we have trail maps now for each area of the preserve, every trailhead, and they're actually quite nice, so you can pass that around. They're available at the front desk. We have a new brochure. This is a very simple brochure. You remember the one, we have the large one that talks about the commission, then we had one just for the Discovery Center. So we kind of combined it and made it something that's very nice and simple that talks about the preserve and the Discovery Center. And that kind of falls out of the whole vision strategy, audience development plan, that it's all one thing that we all work on together. So it's a nice simple brochure. It's built for a rack, as you can see, and it's distributed locally in a lot of places. And we have our public programs. This brochure is, and you can see they all have that color theme. That would be a palette, right, John? Palette. This has all the public programs for the next 6 months, and these are all very impressive, and this one is especially impressive. So again, education, communication staff, you guys deserve a lot of credit. This is a fantastic piece of work. So take a look at that, and they are available. And then we keep sending around brochures. Here's our annual report. This is the draft version of the annual report, and the only change is that our board chair will have a signature in it. So I have 3 copies here, and we'll have those finalized for the meeting in September, or if you want them earlier, you can. You can pass those around too. And that is done in-house with staff, and specifically spearheaded by Wendy Craney, the communications director. A couple of things in the update. I wanted to point out, I pointed out the brochure. We were awarded, the Discovery Center was awarded an award at the Gillen Chamber of Commerce's annual dinner and annual meeting. A couple of weeks ago, there's an award they call Worth a Detour, which is obviously worth a detour, to expose us to people who may not be necessarily have been here before. So Wendy Craney and I were there. We accepted the award. It was a nice honor. And Don Sapos from the town of Gillen helped encourage the chamber to consider us as an applicant. So that was a nice honor. And the plaque is at the front desk. And then finally, you remember at the last meeting I mentioned that we have to replace our boilers, our heating system, and the air handler. The new one won't be that loud, the one that's always a distraction. So Blake Etchison, our Discovery Center manager, Aaron Kino worked with Caro, our property manager, and myself with Excel Engineering. Excel was the engineer who did the whole Discovery Center. Put together design documents, and those design documents have now been formatted into what's called an invitation for bids, an IFB. And that IFB went out Monday morning. And there's a quick turnaround. There's actually, today, there's a walkthrough for interested consultants to come and see the system, and it's actually a requirement if they're going to bid on the project. And that project should be starting in the middle of July with a completion date of October 15th. And that kind of goes into when we get into the action items, the annual plan and the annual budget. The estimate, and I don't know what the bids are going to come in at, but I have it budgeted at $225,000. So that's based on a conversation with the engineers who put the design work together. And I think that's it. I won't go through anything else in the update. There's a lot of stuff that's going on with the staff, with all the departments. Please make sure you take a look at it. There's a lot going on. And I think that's it. Mike? Right?
Yeah, Mike's going to do the...
Sure. And since Marty's out, I'm going to hand these around.
This is the Technical Committee quarterly summary. The Technical Committee met twice this past quarter, in April and in June, and reviewed and commented on 9 different projects. The quarterly report that Chris is passing out summarizes each of the projects and our recommendations. Most of the projects were minor in nature and outside any areas of recommended flow protection in the 2010 management plan and FEIS. And also have been discussed at various previous commission meetings. However, there were 2 new projects. First is a concept review of a 3-lot minor subdivision and full protection area in Gilman, which is area number 73. I always have to cover find stuff on this here. And let's see, and then also there's a concept review of a major subdivision in Column A of 54 lots, and that's in area 52A, which is this area right here. We also heard from the staff on their meetings with the New York Natural Heritage Program and the New York State DEC diversity biologists regarding biodiversity conservation and management in the restored native grasslands. With with regards to the City of Albany landfill habitat restoration project. The 2015 work plan has been approved by the New York State DEC. The Commission issued a temporary revocable permit authorizing work plan implementations on associated preserved lands. And the city is preparing a restoration plan for the cap landfill. The structural analysis of the Albany Pine Bush sand shows it can work on steep slopes, investigating methods of surface erosion, managing wind and water erosion. Actually will be very essential during this implementation. Let's see. Also, there have been weekly coordination between the commission staff, working with the city and its consultants on a bi-weekly basis. And also wanted to mention, which you'll probably mention later, is also the field trip in July.
Yep.
So, which to review a couple of prescription fire and other ecosystem restoration projects. And that pretty much summarizes the technical committee report. So, thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, next we have Lisa Anthony with a financial report.
Good morning. First report in our packets, a statement of financial activities, and this only represents 1 month of our fiscal year, so it's just the month of April through April 30th. The first section is revenues. Dues and contributions are on budget as of April 30th. Government grant income is on budget for April 30th. Mitigation fees, there are no mitigation fees for the month of April. Lease revenue is on budget. Other revenue is slightly higher than budget, and this is just due to an increase in merchandise sales. Total revenue came in at 100% of budget for the month of April. Moving on to expenses, personnel and fringe are on budget. Travel and training is on budget, as well as contractual communications, occupancy, and supplies and equipment. Other expenses are slightly under budget due to the timing of budgeted expenses, giving us a positive NOI on budget of $10,000 for the month of April. Any questions on that? Moving on to the statement of net assets, our cash and cash equivalents increased slightly. Our conservation and land reserves remain the same. Grants receivable increased, and this is due to money owed from DEC for the last quarter of 2015. Accounts receivable is money owed. That decreased slightly, and that's due to mitigation payment that's no longer owed. Inventory remained the same. Prepaid expenses are zero due to the timing of year-end expenditures from March and into our new year in April. Capital investments increased $35,000 due to a positive performance in both of our endowment funds. Capital assets remained unchanged. Total assets increased $46,000 over last year due to mainly an increase in grants receivable and investments both. On to liabilities, accounts payable increased slightly and deferred revenue remained the same for the month of April. On to net assets, investments and capital assets remained the same. Reserve assets remained unchanged also, and unreserved assets increased $46,000 due to a positive NOI and investment income. Any questions on it? Okay. Our final financial report is our investment summary. The reserve had a slightly negative performance for the month of April, and both the Discovery Center endowment and the endowment had a positive performance of 0.83 and 1.2% gain. Overall, our investments had a positive performance with a gain of $35,700. Any questions? No? Thank you.
Thank you.
Angela's here.
Okay, now we're going to hear from Angela on the audit that she performed.
Mind if I sit up there?
No, come on up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Angela Colvin is the principal with Majeski that we work with. She met last week with the audit committee and went through this in fairly significant detail. And I guess anybody, John, being at that committee, if there's anything you wanted to add after she's done.
Yes, will do. There won't be.
Well, I'm open to
offered.
questions.
I don't want people
so-
thinking that I have an issue and you're going to have to sit
No.
through 15 minutes. No, it's a very
No.
good presentation and a very comprehensive one.
Okay, I mean, anybody, if anybody has any questions, you're free to stop me and ask. I mean, this is open, so. The very first thing that I want to go through is the board report. It says to the Board of Directors. This is our required communication with the governing body. So this report in itself is very standard, but if there were things, irregularities, or anything that we wanted to report, this is the vehicle that we would report it through. But I'm just going to go through it because this report itself is very clean. We were hired to audit the financial statements in accordance with U.S. generally accepted auditing standards as well as government auditing standards. And these are the required communications that we're required to report. The qualitative aspects of accounting principles. Management is responsible for the selection and use of accounting policies. The significant accounting policies used by the Commission are in Note A to the financial statements. No new accounting policies were adopted, and the existing policies were not changed. Accounting estimates are a very integral part of the financial statements. The most sensitive estimate in these financial statements is the fair value of investments. The fair value was obtained from third-party pricing services, and they are fairly stated. Oh, I'm not used to two-page printing. We evaluated the key factors and assumptions regarding those estimates and found them to be reasonable in relation to the financial statements as a whole. We encountered no significant difficulties in dealing with management during the performance of our audit. Corrected and uncorrected misstatements. This, I just want to clarify a little bit. When we perform an audit, what we do is we test accounts and balances, and we accumulate any discrepancies that we find. And then at the end of the audit, we look at all those discrepancies in total and decide whether or not an adjustment needs to be made. This audit was so clean that we had no past adjustments whatsoever, and obviously there were no correcting journal entries. There were no disagreements with management in the performance of our audit. Management was asked to sign a representation letter, which they did, representing that they are responsible for the financial statements. Management consultants with other independent accountants. Sometimes there's disagreements with management in regards to accounting policies, and if there is a second opinion sought, the consulting accountant is required to check with us to make sure they have all the facts. To our knowledge, this did not occur. We do discuss a variety of matters, including the application of accounting principles prior to our engagement as auditors, and these discussions occurred in the normal course of our business, and they were not a contingency to our retention as auditors. The other matters, management's discussion and analysis is included in the financial statements. That report in itself is all management's comments. We have very limited procedures. We had made inquiries of management, and we made sure that the numbers that they reported did reconcile to our financial statements, but those were the limited procedures that we applied to that. In addition, we reported on the investment information for New York State, and that was an audited opinion, and we compared and reconciled that information to the accounting records themselves. This, and then the restriction on use, this letter itself is restricted to the board. So this is not a matter of public record, but this is because you have the fiduciary responsibility to oversee the board, the commission. This is how we report everything. Any questions on that? All right, the financial statements themselves. The very first section is management's discussion and analysis. And again, that's all management's comments. And we have very limited procedures, so I'm going to skip right over that. There are two main reports in here that we actually issue. One of them is the independent auditor's report. And then the second one is the report on internal control and compliance. So I'm kind of focused on those two reports because those are the body of what's in here. On page 5, the independent auditor's report. This is what we call a clean opinion. This is the highest level of opinion that you can receive in an audit. We go through, we actually report on the financial statements. We audited the accompanying financial statements. Management's responsibility for the financial statements. Management itself is responsible for the preparation and the fair presentation of these financial statements in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. And this includes the design, implementation, and maintenance of internal control relevant to the preparation and fair presentation of financial statements that are free from material misstatement, error, or fraud. Our responsibility is to express an opinion on these financial statements based on our audits. Those audits, which is U.S. generally accepted auditing standards as well as government auditing standards, require that we plan and perform the audits to obtain reasonable assurance about whether the statements are free from material misstatement. An audit involves performing procedures to obtain evidence about the amounts and disclosures in the financial statements. The procedures that we select depend on our judgment as well as our assessment of the risk of material misstatement. We do consider the internal control relevant to the commission, and we express an opinion on, we only use our consideration of the internal control to assess what procedures we're actually going to perform the audit. So we do evaluate their internal control, but we do not express an opinion on their internal control. We believe that the audit evidence we've obtained is sufficient and appropriate to provide a basis for our opinion. And in our opinion, the financial statements referred to in this handout is presented fairly in all material respects in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles in the USA. The other matters, the required supplementary information, the management's discussion and analysis is prepared by management, and we did very limited procedures on that. We did audit the investment report at the very end of this, which is required supplemental information for New York State. And we did express an opinion on the internal control and compliance of the organization in accordance with government auditing standards, not to provide an opinion on the internal control, but as it was used in our audit, as procedures in our audit. Pages 8 and 9 are the statement of net position and statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position, which this is historical information, and I know Lisa does a very good job of keeping the board up to date on the numbers, so I'm kind of going to skip over that unless somebody has a question. The cash flows, okay. Page 12 is Note A, which is the significant accounting policies that I mentioned in our board report. Now these accounting policies basically are the same as has been reported in the prior at least 2 years that I'm aware of. So there's been no changes in those notes. Note B, the investments, since that is your significant estimate that we reported in the board report, this just tells you what the investments consist of. And it's spelled out: mutual funds, bond funds, common stocks, and money market funds. And then I'm going to skip to page 19, which is the compliance report. Now this report is required in accordance with government auditing standards. This is a report on internal control over financial reporting and on compliance and other matters, including compliance with New York State investment guidelines. We are very happy to report that we noted no deficiencies in internal control that we consider to be material weaknesses. Even though all our testing is sampling. So, I mean, there is a chance that material weaknesses may exist but have not been identified. Again, this report we're testing compliance and internal control relative to our selection of auditing procedures. It is not a report we are not reporting on the entity's internal control itself. And this report is required by government auditing standards, and it is not really suitable for any other purpose. And then the very last page, on page 21, is the investment information for New York State, which is New York State requires any governmental entity to report these certain things regarding their investments. Now, I kind of went through that very quickly, so does anybody have any questions about anything that I may have covered, skipped, not said?
Well, a couple of times you mentioned that it was an extremely good report, extremely clean. You know, you were using hyperbolic language to say this was a good report. Give us a sense, how often does a group get that kind of ranking?
Well, okay, when I said that in a normal audit, we perform our testing procedures and we accumulate misstatements that we find.
Mm-hmm.
It's highly unusual that we go through and don't have any accumulated discrepancies. So when I say this is a very clean audit, this is a very clean audit. There's no past adjustments whatsoever. So this is, the accounting records are in excellent shape here.
Thank you.
Okay, good job, Lisa.
That's your Director of Finance and Operations.
Right.
Absolutely.
And a credit to Margie Stein. She does a great job keeping us in compliance. She's not here.
That's right.
And Chris.
And Chris. Okay, Chris.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else for Angela? No. Thank you, Angela.
You're welcome.
Hey, Chris?
Yes.
Taking a step back a bit.
Yeah.
The restoration work at the corner of 155
And Washington Avenue Extension. Yep.
I've been asked by so many people, is a major development going in there, you know? Have you thought about, and perhaps there is, so I apologize for saying this, do we have signage out there that's, because I drive by it and I don't see the signage.
We do, but they're not very big. And there is now, and Wendy's looking at me, Sarah's looking at me, we now have an internal signage committee.
Gotcha.
And it's come out of the audience development plan and our internal operating plan, and it's in the operations plan and budget that you're about to consider, to have very specific, very large mobile signage for areas like that.
Yeah, I think
Like-
we're missing an opportunity.
But
You know?
like really big, like billboard size.
Yeah.
Like, what's the one? Is it 22 by 10 feet? Am I right? It's really big.
Can it be neon? And maybe.
No, with our graphic design,
Because
we're
when
working.
say passes in here, I can say that?
Yes, you can say that. No, but it's colorful. It's to the point. It's very brief, and it says something like, new Pine Bush coming soon, or something very simple, right?
Gotcha.
Pardon our appearance.
That's it.
Pine Bush coming.
Great.
So really, really
More
simple.
coming.
More Pine Bush coming soon. So it's to the point. People get it,
Yeah,
and it's really, when we have it,
yeah, great.
I can send it to you.
Yeah, all right. Super.
But Mike DeMazzi, he's one of the three reporters for the business review, called me a few weeks ago because he tried all his contacts and he could not figure out what the development was.
Exactly.
And he was beside himself. So he said, well, Chris will probably know because it's right in the Pine Bush's backyard.
Yeah, it's impressive.
So it got us pressed, so I explained it to him, and he said, his point was, he goes, well, why wouldn't you notify the press? And I said, we did. We sent out a press release, but nobody picks it up.
Yeah.
You know, and we have a blog on our website. We have information on our website. We did a mailing, but it's the biggest habitat restoration project that we've done to date. It's 47 acres. There's like, you can see the corner that's left. There's like 4 acres left. And with weather and equipment breakdowns, it's taken a lot longer. You know, when we had some issues with sand, trying to stabilize that sand, because we needed to get the oats that we put down, and you can see the rows of the oats now growing, to stabilize that sand. But our problem was in May, the lack of rain. So now no, we don't have that problem anymore. No, the seeds, because we use a seed drilling, it drives it deep, so.
All right, well, that's good to hear.
But that should be done by the end of July. So, any other questions on habitat work? Okay.
All right, so we're going to move to the action items.
Action items. So action items A and B are directly, obviously related. Action item A is the operating plan. We adopted an operating plan and a budget in December. And as you know, we have to do that because they have to be adopted under the Public Authorities Law based on our fiscal year by January 1st. So because the legislature changed and that was based on an appropriation, a conservative appropriation of $2 million from the Environmental Protection Fund. So at the end of the day, when the budget was passed, the legislature appropriated $2.475 million. So there's an additional $475,000. So the operating plan and the budget recognize both of those things. There's not really anything really significant in the operating plan because it's broad, but there are some things that are very specific, like the boiler. This new agreement that we have, this cooperative agreement working with the City of Schenectady and the Friends of Woodlawn to possibly help them with personnel time, resources, maybe some equipment. There's specificity now about that position that I sent around, the community engagement coordinator position, and how that position interacts with the volunteer program. And there's specificity in the operating plan about office upgrades. So with new staff and going through this whole organizational restructure, we're redoing our office space basically, and you can see it. So the Lupin Learning Center, which is in between here and the Carner classroom, is where education staff work, and they've been separated from us. So everybody is now going to be on that one side, and we're creating office space there. So those are the major changes in the operating plan. And I can say, you have a question?
I was just going to say, in the future, because it's probably going to happen each year, just highlight the changes. That'd be real easy.
Yeah, yes.
Thanks.
You mean like that?
Like that.
And do it on the computer?
Do it on the computer.
You got it.
You got it.
Yes.
You got it.
Well, yes, because...
We're no smarter than you, Chris.
Yes, because after the board packet went out, I'm like, I'm going to have to explain this, and how are people going to keep track? Thank you, Tony, yes. Yes.
Another helpful thing for me would be an org chart.
Oh, sure.
Just when at these annual meetings, when you're like, okay, this is how we're going to go forward.
Yeah, because we have one now. And it's on the
Okay.
It's on our website.
It's on the website? Okay.
How about I send the org chart to everybody here?
Great.
The link.
Yeah,
Good?
good, thanks.
Actually, it changes, so I'll send you the most updated one that has all the seasonals on
I
it.
know, it does change, yeah.
But look,
Okay.
because we're still not finished with the whole education department either, and this new position. And Harvey had asked that, Harvey said, once the dust settles, can you send me a new org chart?
Dust never settles on org charts.
No, but...
Hardly
but
ever.
I'll
If you said
I have to change my request?
Yeah.
Updated, it'd be the same.
No, because the org chart that's on the website is just for permanent staff. It doesn't have seasonals on
I
it.
see.
Just do it with the operating plan each year.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And every update thereof.
Well, no, once a year.
Well, usually it's not that significant. So that's the operating plan, and then I'll explain. So in the budget, the major changes are, remember the boiler, so there's $225,000 for the boiler. There's an additional $100,000 that we were going to use reserves for that, so we don't have to do that now. There's an additional $100,000 that is in contracts, and because I wasn't sure what would happen with Woodlawn. That money kind of stayed there as a holding zone, but my anticipation is any expenses would be very, very minimal, so it's going to just go right into habitat work on the ground. Joel has it all. Joel has plans for it all, but I didn't budget it specifically. But it would go into locust removal and additional mowing work. So there's that's 325, and the additional 150 is what I said. It's spread through the different departments: education, communications, office, some more training, and more specifically, a lot more into habitat work and the burn boss contractor. So the burn boss contractor, just for an example, every time the burn boss comes here and leads a controlled burn, that's $4,000, which sounds like a lot of money, but to manage 50 acres at once for $4,000 compared to locust work, which is considerably more, it's reasonable. So that's kind of the two together. Unhighlighted. Steve.
Maybe this is not the time to take it up, but as I was rereading the operating plan, the whole audience development plan didn't seem to be a big part of that. And I understand the changes that you made were mostly related to the budget here. But as I read through that, it's like that whole process may not have taken place, other than a little bit of restructuring in the education program in that position. And I guess I'm just wondering, should it be, or I know we can pass it on to December for the next annual one.
We can. I mean, it's specifically, if you look at page 5 of the plan.
I didn't print it out,
Oh, here.
sorry.
Well, here, I'll get you one, so we can talk about it. I put it in there, and I didn't know how much, because there's not a lot of detail for a lot of the. There's not a lot of specificity in the annual plan. And the annual plan is created specifically for our contract with DEC. And the real detail is in our internal operating plan. But if you look at Roman numeral 4A, so it specifically identifies the vision strategy, the audience development plan, and the internal operating plan, that our operations and programs have to be aligned with those. And then it talks specifically about under staff and team building, D1, that the director's team routinely evaluates and implements and adapts the recommendations of those 3. So it's in there, but it's not, but if you think we can, I mean, some of the things like that are coming out of the operations plan, like that signage, for example, that's specifically, that's in here. Highlighted on mine.
Where is that? Where is that highlight?
It's not.
It's not.
Oh.
It's not. It's on page 4. If you see on page 4, if you look at 20, number 20, it says
Yes,
renew.
new signage,
And
okay.
create new signs identifying restoration projects.
We're on a need to know basis.
You don't need to know any of this.
Where's Waldo?
Yeah, you're only the board. So tell me what you need and you will get it, let me tell you. So it's there. Yes, we will highlight.
Would it be possible to highlight a copy and just, since it's all electronic?
Yeah,
just email
yeah,
it
I'll
to
do
us,
that.
and then we can, at our leisure.
Hey, Chris.
Can we ask again?
How's your morning going, Chris?
Chris, write it down one more time.
All right.
Who's the committee? I'm curious about the signage committee.
Who's on the signage committee?
Yeah. Is it anybody external?
Nope, it's internal. It's education, communications, and stewardship.
Okay.
And a graphic designer.
External, internal.
External.
Okay. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, signage committee is education, stewardship, and communications.
I have to say, one
Do you
thing
want
I
to
like,
be on that committee?
No, I just think it's a good idea. And I love what you're doing. I think, and
All right.
also the bigger the better.
yeah, adding on to Elaine, I have to say, like, just these new brochures and everything that are coming out, it's kind of, the colors that you're seeing on them are the same colors that you're seeing on the main sign.
And all in here.
All in here,
Yep.
everything is, there's
Branding.
There's a palette theme going
Visual
on.
identity program.
Yeah, I mean, all that, again, that all came out of the audience development plan.
Which is, it's one thing to do an audience development plan, and
Right.
there's a second to implement it, and implement it correctly. And I think a lot of credit's got to be given to staff for implementing this in a very professional and correct way.
Yeah, the staff does a good job on that. The executive director needs to do a little better on highlighting things in the
I'll give
operating
you one
plan.
color, Chris.
All we're asking for is yellow.
Yellow.
Either yellow or orange, one or the
I'll
other.
give
But
you
it has to
yellow.
be the branding yellow, please.
Yeah, that's like, that color, what's, Wendy, what's the name of that yellow?
Highlight yellow. Not
Pantone,
mustard.
Pantone number 111 or something. All right. Seriously, are there other questions about the plan or the budget that I can answer?
Would now be the time to ask about what transpired with Woodlawn, or can we deal with that later? I mean, it's not specific to this. but,
Sure, we can,
Okay, I mean, I'm just curious I know that you've worked on an agreement, but I haven't really, kind of heard the details of that or kind of what's coming down the pipe.
sure. So we now have an agreement. It's a cooperative agreement, non-obligatory, so it doesn't mean anybody has to work with one another. It's, voluntary. So it's between the commission, the Friends of the Woodlawn Preserve, which is a incorporated 501c3, they've been doing basically all the work on the preserve for the last 11 years, and the city of Schenectady because they own the property. So it provides for us, the commission, and this is based on requests over several years, but even more specifically the technical committee last fall, for help, to help the Friends and the city manage Woodlawn Preserve more in line with the way we manage the Albany Pine Bush Preserve. And that was also strongly urged by Assemblymember Steck. So what that really provides for is they can use some of our equipment. So if they needed like a hand tool or loppers or things like that for trail work, they can borrow that kind of, those kinds of resources. But more importantly, what they need is help in planning and figuring out what can they do and where do they go. So that's conservation and that's stewardship. That's Neil and that's Joel. So Neil and Joel and I met with the Friends of Woodlawn a couple of weeks ago to figure out how do we start this. So as a start, what we're going to do is we have new aerial imagery, satellite imagery, which you can now get down to the species level. So you can get down to the individual tree level, which is very, cool. So we have that. Woodlawn is encompassed in that. So we're going to use that, and we're going to work with the Heritage Program, Steve Young, who's the botanist there, and basically do some community mapping. And then we can come up with a one-page recommendation of what they can do. The problem is that residents there and some members of the Friends, they don't want to use prescribed fire. They don't want to use chemicals. So they're not going to get rid of black locust unless you have some use of chemicals. You're not going to manage pine bush habitat appropriately if you don't use fire in some way. But there's things that they can do to manage, on a smaller scale, invasives, repeated clipping, cutting, things like that. And we can help them with recreation.
What's the basis, what's the basis of the concern about fire?
Oh, the same as any other, anybody else who's not familiar with it. That they're concerned about, the average person is concerned if they don't understand prescribed fire and how we use it. The concern is that, there would be a catastrophe.
The Friends group should understand.
Oh, the Friends group should understand, but not all the members of the Friends group understand.
Okay, right. Okay.
Which is, let's look at it realistically. Here's a place that's very new community, a lot of public outreach, a lot of education would have to happen to help those people understand why we would ever use fire there in the first place. So it's not something we would do in the next 2 years. That's a long term down the road. And I would be hesitant, and as it is now, the way we burn in the preserve, we would have to hire a contractor. We can't do that. We can't hire a contractor to work on property that's not under the direct management of the commission.
Okay.
So we can move along, we can do some community mapping, we can help figure out, we do some planning work, and we can help them think about, like, from a recreational standpoint, you know, do their trails make sense, and are people getting a good experience as a visitor and things like that. So that's kind of that's where we are, Steve. I guess we didn't really have an opportunity to talk much about it in the board meeting. So, and I can add this just so people know. So they're going back to why I placed that 100,000 as a placeholder in that budget. There was a potential for 100,000 of our appropriation to be moved out, carved out specifically, and given to Woodlawn. Session
At
is
the state level.
at the state level, and I have no control. We have no control over that. So I put that in there for this budget because by the, so the session ended, and to my knowledge, it hasn't happened, and I would expect that I would know that. So that's why it'll end up back in this reserve. Mike?
Chris, I was just going to make the suggestion that for the July field trip,
Yeah.
that maybe reach out to the Friends of Woodlawn to invite them.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea.
Tag along.
I invited Janet, but we'll invite the whole Friends group. And since we're on that topic, and I had it in my notes, so we are doing a field trip. I think I sent that to all of you, July 7th, 9:30 to 11:30. And this year, we're going to look specifically at areas that we've burned this year. We've burned 121 acres this season so far. And you can see the immediate response, the plant response. It's greening up quickly. So you can just respond to me.
Say the hours again of that on July 7th?
July 7th, 9:30 to 11:30. We'll gather here and we'll carpool using vans from DEC.
You need a response from us?
Yeah, but if you don't know for sure, you can show up. I would prefer a response so we know if we have enough, but that's all right. Worst case scenario is I drive. It's fine with me. Fit my vehicle. Or John's top.
Is that allowed?
It's a hybrid.
I'll rent a couple four-wheelers for people.
Anything else I can answer about Woodlawn or restoration stuff? No?
One of those.
Okay.
Looking for a motion?
I'm looking for a motion on the first one, on the operating plan.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Sorry, I'm taking your job over.
That's fine.
So for the operating budget, is there a motion?
I'll move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. The third action item is public authority documentation, compliance documentation. These are the three documents that we must approve every year, and we do it at the June meeting because they basically come out of part of them come out of the audit. One of them comes out two of them specifically come out of the audit, which we obviously just finished. And we have to upload them into the reporting system, the Paris system, by June 30th. All of our reporting goes into the Paris system by June 30th to be in compliance. So we have, the first one is the prompt payment policy report. We have a prompt payment policy as a public authority. We're required to basically pay our vendors within 30 days upon receipt, or pay interest. That's obviously if the bill is accurate, whatever, and we do that. We always do that. We typically pay within 7 days. And for some outstanding reason, it might be 14, but it's almost always 7 days. So that's the first one. That's the
State appropriates the money.
Yes, as long as the state, but that's an extenuating circumstance, and that doesn't apply. I actually asked that. I'm backwards. No, that's the second one. So the assessment of the internal controls. The assessment of the internal controls is directly related to the last part of the audit that Angela talked about, the internal controls report. And this certifies that we have internal controls, external party looked at them, and that they're adequate. And then the third one is the summary of financial information, which is directly out of the reporting that we do for Paris. And it's tied, obviously, again, back directly to the audit for the year, to the fiscal, the 13-14 fiscal statement. Any questions? They're the same every year. Oh, well, they should be the same every year. We need to be in compliance every year, so.
Elaine, has everyone, all different members of the commission gotten their
Yes.
surveys or tallies?
Yes, and there's a copy of it in the board packet. So everybody submitted, and the only thing that,
Oh, no, they don't have it.
oh, they don't have
No,
this.
Donna must have put that in yours.
Oh,
You're special.
I'm
We-
special.
No,
Okay.
I
So I'll
got,
tell you.
yeah, because I got the updated version from Donna yesterday at like 4:30.
Oh, beautiful, okay, so.
Thanks for asking.
So Donna in my office collects these, but I don't see the individual reports that come in. So yes, everyone completed their board performance questionnaire, and the vast majority of people agreed with every criteria that we were looking at. The only slight issue is in the area of the board has identified the areas of most risk to the authority and works with management to implement risk management strategies before problems occur. 2 of the 9 board members moved their answer over to somewhat agree. So no one disagreed or somewhat disagreed with any of these criteria, so outstanding, I think. But looking forward to continual improvement, if any of the board members would like to explore this idea of risk management assessment, I think we should do that. And also risk management is such a big, like it could be financial, it could be to the Pine Bush, I don't know what the risk was that people were thinking about. So, I'm sure Chris is open to that discussion, as am I.
Sure, like if, and as the governance committee chair, we could have that coordinated with Elaine to come in and meet with probably Lisa and I, because we only have so much time. We don't talk a lot about it. So we never talk about things like separation of duties.
Right.
Like, I can imagine, like, none of you can easily say, how do accounts payable work within the staff? And it's spread basically among the staff person who makes the purchase, their supervisor, the office manager, the director of finance and operations, and me. So there's like very clear separation of duties, but you wouldn't know that unless we went through a lot of that. Go ahead, Lisa.
And I can help out with that. We have, as part of our internal controls, a few documents, payroll processes, cash receiving investments, that I go through for compliance with the auditors. That's our pre-audit conversation. And I have those documents, so that gives us our internal controls per category that I could actually send out. That gives our process, right down to payroll, what day or time sheets do, what systems do we use, who signs off on what. Accounts payable, payroll, investments. Our significant financial risk that Angela just went through is really the only thing that we have that's significant are our investments.
Right.
So we have that policy. So we mitigated that risk by having equities less than 60%. So the investments are the significant financial risk. The rest of the policies and procedures I have in place in documents that are updated every year verbally and in writing with the auditors to be in compliance with government accounting principles and GASB, which is GASB, and GAAP. So I have those two, if that would help.
Do people want to see those? We can send those electronically.
No, Chris,
No.
I can even see at a future meeting, just having a discussion on that.
Sure. Yeah, like a discussion topic.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Because to Elena's point, I answered that as I agree because of my position on the finance committee. But as I was looking through the assessment of internal controls document, number 2 says determining the risk associated with operations. management that should assess the risk associated and assign a risk level, blah, blah, blah. You know, I sort of looked at that and I said, ooh, we don't really do that. And then I thought, oh, wait a minute, yes, we do. Part of the finance committee, in a general sense, we handle every one of those. But we don't do it as a board.
Right.
So we probably should once a year.
And I have all those documents.
Yeah, let's, if we should do that in, well, I'll look at our agenda and see how it falls out. That'd be a good presentation, discussion topic. Yeah. Good. Makes me
Yes,
feel
I
better when
appre-
the board asks questions.
Yeah, and I appreciate everyone's
Buzz.
completing the survey. It's a good tool.
Oh, it is.
It's excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there other questions on those three? Larry?
Just to point out, there are a number of policies from an operations standpoint that also mitigate risk, use of equipment, and there are policies, all the contracts requiring insurance on the part of contractors and all that's in there. So there are, it falls into a lot of different areas and covered by a lot of them. But I don't know that there's one, risk management mirrors everything. So, it's good to go over. But I know a lot of it's covered, but it's good for everyone to know that it's covered.
Yeah, I mean, the areas could include security, public safety.
Sure.
Okay.
Like things like,
You know.
I mean, has the board probably has never reviewed the emergency action plan for the facility that we're now expanding to the preserve, right? And typically the board has had little interest in getting into that level, but I think it's probably important that you know that where you could access it.
Right.
Yep.
Right, and if any of the board members do have a particular concern, I think you should raise it at this, either now or at a meeting where we cover
Sure.
risk assessment.
Or with me
Yeah.
directly at any
Yeah.
time. Like for an example, we have things like incident reports. If a member of the public is here and they injure themselves, we have an incident report that's filed. It's reviewed by me as the executive director and Lisa as the internal compliance person. So those are the kind of things that are probably good to know about.
Yeah.
Okay?
I think as one of the people that, I think that was I was one that checked that out.
Yeah.
It didn't have to do with the fact that I thought these policies were in place, but just.
You don't know.
I don't know.
You
We
don't
never
know.
discussed it.
Yeah.
And the question is about whether or not the board discusses this. And-
Right.
Right.
And so I do think, I
Right.
mean, it doesn't have to be a comprehensive review once a year, but like a lot of the things, we learn one, kind of piecemeal. But here's what we're
Right.
doing in this area, here's what we're doing in
Right.
that area. Gene took out the whole boundary issue. I mean, that was about risk, at least in part with the gun club.
Oh, yeah.
Things like that. I mean, and that was a very specific case.
Right.
We addressed it and
Yep.
kind of had prolonged discussion about that.
Yeah.
Sure.
But we just normally don't. That's, I think, why,
Yeah.
check that out.
Yeah, again, so we'll do that at a future meeting, but if you have specific, you can always reach out to me. There is sometimes I say, well, how come the board doesn't ask more questions? Careful what you ask for, right? But that's my job.
Yeah.
Anything else on that? That action item? Can we have a motion? Steve? Mike? Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Good discussion. Okay, timer, good, we're ahead of schedule. Executive session, we need to review minutes from the last executive session. I need to talk about some real property stuff and personnel stuff. So we'll take 5 minutes or less and come back here. Can I have a motion to go out of regular and into executive session? Mike, Elaine second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.